So I was in my room and I was doing meditation, and felt like I was having this out-of-body experience. And, and I was in there, and I just felt like I was moving up through the ceiling, and I could see all of Birmingham. And then, and I rose up a little bit more, and I rose up in the clouds, and, and I could just look down and see everything. And I got to this place, and there was a platform there. And there was this lady standing there when I got there, and she says, hey, this is what I want you to do. I want you to take this chalk, and I want you to write down all your character defects. And I started walking, and I started writing, and I walked, and I wrote, and I walked, and I wrote, and I walked, and I wrote. And about an hour into it, I looked up, and I could see from a distance a shadow, just a little shadow from the distance. And I walked, and I wrote a little bit more, and I wrote a little bit more, and finally I looked up, and it was like I could see a human form, and it was coming toward me, and I wrote some more, and I wrote some more, and finally it was Ricky. It was Ricky, the convention chair. And I said, Ricky, what are you doing here, man? How you doing? What are you doing here? And he looked at me, he said, whiny, Carl, I just came back to get some more chalk. Hello, everyone. My name is Carl, and I'm a real cocaine addict. And first and foremost, I'm going to thank him who has many names for allowing me to be here at Sober, and for that I'm eternally grateful. I want to thank you guys for putting on one hell of a convention. I want to thank the committee for inviting me. Thank everybody that has participated, the speakers, the workshops. Thank my hosts, Russell and Maria. I came here and I was feeling kind of bad when I got here, and I was at Russell's house coughing like I had the bubonic plague or something, and Russell, with his selfish ass, he bought me cough syrup and everything else. He told me, motherfucker, I don't care if you die, but you're going to speak here tonight. So I'm going to die after the meeting, all right? Man, this is awesome. This is awesome. And I'll share with you why it's awesome. On behalf of my home group, which is the Pomona group in San Gabriel, Pomona Valley, we bid you welcome. If you're ever in California, stop by and see us. We meet on Wednesday night, Tuesday night, Thursday, Friday, and on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, we have a big book study, and and we go real nice and slow. And on Wednesday night, we have what's called a crosstalk meeting. And, that's exactly what it is. It's a crosstalk meeting, not, the regular rude meeting where, you're talking and somebody else is talking. That's called a rude meeting. No, we have a crosstalk meeting. And, if the first time you come, we prefer for you to lie. That way we can get to know you. My story is real simple. It's like everyone's in here almost. I came from a relatively good family. I had a great background growing up. I was born in a small town in Tennessee. If you don't know what Tennessee is, it's probably like Luton. Nobody ever goes there. All the people just been stranded. What happened is I came from one of those typical homes where in the South where, what goes on in the house stays in the house. I don't know if you came from that type of house, but guess where I came from. What goes on in the home stays in the home. My father, he had a third grade education. He was an entrepreneur. One of the smartest men I ever met in my entire life. He provided a home for 7 children. I'm talking about in the just early, watch it, Ricky. Just early, okay? And, and he provided a home for us. And, each one of us had our own rooms. We shopped at, the exclusive stores at that time. It was Sears and Roebuck's. Look at that, young people going, what? And so, and what was going on in the house is that my father, he was beating the hell out of my mother. My father, he may have been considered one of us, but he wasn't one of us. They have a line in our book, and they talks about him, and, they called him a certain type of hard drinker. What happened is in 1962, my mother left, and she took my sisters And me and my brother stayed with my father for another 2 years. And in that 2 years, one of the most miraculous things that I ever seen in my life happened. My father stopped drinking, and he never took another drink to the day he died on December 7th, 1996. He never took another drink. Our book, it describes people like him, where he was able to just put it down and walk away, and and I don't know if it was because my mother left or what have you, but he had a sufficient reason to stop. Now, I don't know about you, but I've had many sufficient reasons, and I've had many women leave me, but I haven't found a reason to stop yet. And what happened is that, we stayed there with my father a couple of more years, and then me and my brothers, we left, and we went to Grand Rapids, Michigan. And when we went to Michigan, it was culture shock. We went from living in this big house and having all this land and money and everything else to we went to moved into what I like to call a tenement. It was, it was a one-bedroom, and the kids slept in the room. My mother slept on the couch, and, and there was a community bathroom. That sounds like a sober house, don't it? Let me try that again. That sounds like a sober house, don't it? Oh, okay. I want to know if there's some people out there. I took my glasses off so I can't see you, so it don't matter. And we went from having everything, man, to, going on the social programs, the welfare program and all these other little things. And, and what happened is my mother, she went back to school and, and we started to live a better life. And, and what happened is, in 1968, in Grand Rapids, Michigan, something was going on so bad in my life that I didn't really understand what was going on, that on Thanksgiving, 1968. Now, I don't know about you guys, what you do here, but in where I grew up at, there's always that kid table. You guys have that kid table? So I'm sitting at that kid table, and all the other kids are there, the grown-ups are over here, and somebody comes in with a bottle of Morgan David Cold Duck. And they pour it all in their glasses on every kid, and every kid had a glass. None of those kids drink any that night, and I drank 7 glasses of Morgan David Cold Duck. And, I've always been what's considered an introvert, but that night, man, I had it going on that night. Man, that night I was singing James Brown, I Feel Good. I was doing the dance that went with it, doing the Temptation strut, and, and I fell in love that night. She was 29 and I was 8. And I got my first resentment because I saw her leave with another man. So I've been resentful at you all for a very long time. And it didn't matter that it was her husband, but it was another man. And my mother, she met this nice man, and, we decided to move, and we moved to California. And so, it was like we moved, and it was like the Beverly Hillbillies, right? Because, we grew up in Tennessee, and we had a Southern accent. We went to Michigan, and in Michigan, they have Southern accents. And now we moved to California, and they don't sound nothing like us. Because, we saying stuff like y'all and them and things like that. And we moved to California, and they go, you guys. And, we looking at them like, we heard about people from California anyway. Never been there, but we heard about them. And so we moved there, man, and what we did is we moved over into what we call the Bottoms over there on 43rd and Hooper, right? And, if you know anything about California, that's called the East Side. And, we get over there, man, and all these dudes over there, they have like cool nicknames, like Big Sluggo, Killer, Killer 1, Killer 2, Killer 3, Big Pinky, and they call me Country. You can't catch a girl with a name like Country, Just move your country ass over there and sit down, And, I grew up, with a terrible nickname and a terrible neighborhood, and I started hanging out, man, and I became a community activist. I joined an organization called Community Revolution in Progress, Crips, and started actively destroying the neighborhood that I was living in, man, and what made it bad is that, I wasn't a stupid kid, so, you can't grow up and be a gangbanger and, and be smart at the same time. So, I had to dummy up in school, but I carried a 3.5 grade point average. I was on the dean's list at one point, but then I wanted to do, the after-school activities. And eventually the after-school activities ran out. And I started drinking a little bit more, and, and I started smoking weed. I smoked weed for 2 years. That was it, because weed was too slow for me. I like the zoom. I don't know about you guys, I like zoom. I like to get out there in a hurry, and, and at that time in the 70s, look at Ricky. Ricky made a little comment about horseback earlier, and we had cars in the 70s, Ricky. Just want to tell you that, okay? Now, when Russell was little, they had horses, but we had cars. So, they had this thing called angel dust. I don't know if you guys ever heard of angel dust. It's embalming fluid. And, I don't know about anybody else, but I love the effects produced by angel dust. Angel dust gets you out there in a hurry. It's real quick. Don't take long. Don't take much, right? I used to like to take mine, dip it, put it in the freezer, take it out, dip it again, put it back in the freezer, light it up, take 2 hits, and take off my clothes. I don't know why my clothes would come off when I would do that, but they would always come off, and then it would make it so bad I would be up on the roof naked, and, and my girlfriend be down there with one of her friends, and they would be down there laughing at me. I don't know why they was laughing. They sprayed water on me, so I was having, we're not even going to get into that, bad memories automatically, And so, I started smoking angel dust and, and doing things that I wasn't supposed to be doing and, just detrimental to the whole neighborhood that I was living in. And, and I never had a job, never wanted to get a job because my father used to tell us when we was growing up, stuff like games should be sold and not told. So that's the ideals that I came up with. In the midst of growing up like that, my father, he had what's called, you guys call pubs. He owned 4 of them, and so I grew up in that type of life environment where I would go in the clubs, in and out of the clubs as a little kid. And so this is what the lifestyle that I desired. And I set out to live that lifestyle. I started carrying guns, and I started robbing banks and doing things that the normal 15-year-olds are not supposed to do. And I enjoyed that lifestyle. I really did. And that lifestyle took me to places that I never should have been going. It allowed me to see things and do things that I never should have been doing. First time I snorted cocaine was in 1970. There he goes again. First time I snorted cocaine. And I mean, it was doing, I don't know if you guys saw the movies like Superfly and, what was his name? Shaft and all of that, the black exploitation films, right? And that's when everybody wore the spoon around their neck, It's not like I'm a drug addict, but why do you have the spoon around your neck? You know what I mean? And, the first time I snorted cocaine, it was like everybody else in the black neighborhood. Immediately I snorted cocaine and my voice changed. Yeah, baby, what's happening? Yeah, we go on down, everybody in the black neighborhood talk like that. As soon as they snorted cocaine, I mean, dudes with deep voices. Yeah, how you doing, man? Yeah, man. Everybody was doing it, man. It was amazing to me, And so what happened is that, I went into a bank one day to make a withdrawal, and when I came out, the police was out there and asked me for the deposit slip. And they wanted to deposit me into a place, and at that time I was 18 years old, and, and I had a Fu Manchu, and I had French braids down to the middle of my back, and, and I was cute. I was real sexy, and I was too sexy to be going to the penitentiary. I was not penitentiary material. No. And what happened is I kept fighting this case, and the judge made me a deal. The deal was, I could go into any branch of the military that I wanted, or he was going to give me 10 years. And, and I chose the United States Marine Corps. So, Ricky, October 24th, 1978, I was standing on the yellow footprints. And it was an adventure, and for the next 12 years I would be there, and, and I did what we do, you know what I mean? You know what we do. I got there and I was, Bill talked about it. Fortune and applause was thrown my way. I got the promotions. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. You know, I had extended my hand so far out that I could continue to pat myself on the back. You know, and it was a great adventure, man. You know, and I met you people the first time in 1980. You know, I was in Iwakuni, Japan, and I was, you know, in Japan, they drive on the same side of the road that you guys drive on. But I got drunk and I wanted to drive on the American side one night, and they kind of frowned on that. And so, you know, I had to go and visit them, and they sent me to visit you all. In 1980, I was 20 years old, and I came to my first meeting of those folks, and it was some idiot like the guy who was up here reading before I got here. Another idiot was reading something else, and then an idiot like me came up and said his name, and he said the dumbest thing that I've ever heard in my entire life. He said, "My name is John, and I'm an alcoholic. Now let's go around the room and introduce ourselves." And they went around the room, and each one of them, "My name is Bill, I'm an alcoholic." "Yeah, you look like one." "My name is Mary, I'm an alcoholic." "Oh, that poor child." "My name is Randy, I'm an alcoholic." "Yeah, And they got to me, and I looked around, and I said, "Yeah, my name's Carl, I'm confused." And this idiot stayed up there talking, and he talked for about a few minutes, and then he said the words that walked me right out the door. He said, "I'm powerless." Now, I was 20 years old. I was a sergeant in the Marine Corps. Only been in 2 years, and I was already a 3-stripe sergeant. I was on the drill field, and I had power and control. When I walked in the room, 80 men would stand on their feet, and they wouldn't move until I tell them to move. I could walk in this building, all these men would stand up, and I could walk out that door, come in that door, go out that door, and they would still be in the same position. I had power and control. So I don't know what this fool was talking about. He powerless. Yeah. You be powerless by yourself. And I signed my card the rest of the 4 times I was supposed to visit you people, because I wasn't coming back. You know, and a few years later, I married my high school sweetheart. Ladies, take a walk with Carl. Just the ladies. I don't play that funny business, all right? So ladies, picture this. I'm 23 years old. I'm 6'1 and a half, 165 pounds of twisted steel and sex appeal. I said I'm 6'1 and a half. This is my story, fellas. I see how you're looking at it. I'm telling this story, all right? I'm 6'1 and a half. See, that's why I wouldn't let you go on the journey, see? And me and this lady, I got married in full dress blue uniform. We had what's called the officer's sword, the Mameluke sword, the white one. Knew a guy in supply, and we got him. When they said, "I'd like to present to you for the state of California, Mr. and Mrs. Carl M. Warlick." Their heels came together, and these all guys turned, the precision turns, walked up the aisleway, they stopped, and all the swords came out, and we walked through cross sabers. We cut the cake with the Mameluke sword. The best day of her life. You guys quick, you must know I'm going somewhere with this. We got married on a Saturday. I was sleeping with another woman on Sunday. Don't judge me, you in CA too. You know, and I remember the wedding vows, man. In the wedding vows, you know, we said a lot of good things, a lot of flowering stuff in the wedding vows. One of the things we talked about was, you know, love, honor, protect, you know, what the role of the husband was going to be, and I didn't fulfill any of those roles. You know, within a few months, you know, she was back in L.A., and I was glad she was gone. You know, it went from being verbal to physical, things that I said I would never do. I turned into the person that I said I would never turn into. You know, I turned into my father. And I said I would never be that man. And she went back to L.A., and, you know, and I was somewhat glad she left. And I left the States, and I went to Japan, and I stayed there for the next 5 years. And in the next 5 years, I would, get more rank and be more successful at what I was doing. And, and I came back to the States and, and the divorce was already in and I was off and running. Alcohol has always been prevalent in my life. And that's why I love Cocaine Anonymous, because we get to talk about, cocaine and all other mind-altering substances. All other mind-altering substances. I used to like to take acid. I don't know about anybody else in here. And then I saw some of y'all going, follow that hand all the way across of it. And so, I like acid, man, and in the military, I don't know if any of you guys have been in the military, man, and they say there's no, hey, turn out that blue light. What are you doing? And they say in the military there's no drugs, but we had everything that we wanted was right there in front of us, and and don't think I didn't partake in them, because I was, and and right after that, they came out with the law that you couldn't do drugs. But by then I was an E7 gunnery sergeant, and I was the guy that was doing the urine tests. Right? If you're gonna violate the law, you might as well be the law. And so, we doing this thing, man, and and I'm having fun and I'm living life, and and then the trouble started, because I got another DUI, and and I had to visit you guys again, around about 85, and and I just came back to the States, and and I had been watching the television in Japan, and and I had been hearing the news. There was this new thing that was out, called rock cocaine. And, and everybody that I talked to, they told me, Carl, don't mess with this. Don't mess with this. But I remember the first time when I freebased, it was in the 70s, and I took a couple of hits and it went down in my stomach and it made me sick, and I never did that again. Now, I snorted a lot of cocaine and, and I did other stuff, but smoking that stuff was not going to be my thing. But, like I said, should I say it again? So you guys know, when I start mentioning cocaine, my story almost over, right? Either I'm going to get sober or I'm going to die up here, one or the other. But, it's going to come to an end real quick. So in 1985, man, I was home, and, it was one of those typical California days. I had just had another fight with my ex-wife at about 6 in the morning. And I remember we used to get notes from our neighbors. Every time we moved, we used to get thank you letters. People would thank us for moving, Thank you, glad you're gone, and we had another one of those arguments, and, and I was going to leave L.A., and I went to Pasadena because my mom lived in Altadena, which is just north of Pasadena. And I'm driving, man. It's beautiful out there, man. We were driving up this street. I'm going up the street called Fair Oaks. And just picture this. You're going north, straight toward the mountains. There's palm trees everywhere. It's sunny. It's like 7 o'clock in the morning. It's about 90 degrees, or should I say 45 Celsius. So it was hot, And I got my shirt off, and I'm just got a beer between my legs already, so I'm feeling kind of good. And I look over, and I see this girl standing over to my right. She had French braids that came down to here, and her shorts came up to meet her French braids. And I kind of looked at her, and she looked at me, and I still remember when I pulled over, she kind of stuck her leg out, and she smiled. She said, hey, sucker. Hey, brother. And I pulled over, and, excuse me, I pulled over, and she and I made a commitment. She told me, if I spend $10, all these magnificent things were going to happen. So all she said was $10. And we went to the spot, and and it was just crazy, man. Picture this. She's over there, and we're having this nice conversation. She and I, we just having dialogue, and it's back and forth, and she's over there doing like this, and just chopping and doing whatever she was doing, and I'm over here drinking, thinking, yeah, we getting ready to have some fun up in here, boys. And she went like this, and she said, and all of a sudden her lip dropped, and she started talking like this. And I was like, what the hell? Never seen nothing like that in my entire life. What the hell just happened? And we go, what? And she sat there, and, and I'm getting nervous now, and I'm thinking the fun is over. What just happened? And then she did it again, and she said to me, she said, she couldn't say, she said, they coming, who coming? Who's coming? I got my hand on my knife now, wait, what's going on here? I don't understand nothing that's going on. I never seen this, and she's standing there peeking out the window and carrying on, Oh, no, what happened? And she looked at me and said, you want some? No, not if it's doing you like that. No. And we just, and I'm sitting there shaking, my heart beating fast, and I haven't even hit it yet, I'm just scared. And she does it again, and this time she just looked at me and her head spun around like the exorcist. And she came back with that look on her face. I want to play. No, you're not playing with me. And $1,600 later, I'm just saying, and $1,600 later, none of those things she said would have to happen, no, because after I put her out, you got to go, and the big book, man, it makes it real simple, it talks about people like me, and it tells me why I do what I do. It says men and women like Carl, they drink essentially because they like the effects produced by it. But see, I'm here to tell you the secret. I'm going to give you the secret right here. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you, man. Russell himself wouldn't even get me a glass of water. He's supposed to be my friend and my host. He got what he wanted out of me now. He don't need me no more. And so the real secret is this right here. What the big book should have said was, men and women like Carl, they smoke. You guys ready for this? You ready? Because they like the effects produced by car antennas. Yep. I spent $1,600 on a car antenna about this long. And for the next 7 years, I would chase car antennas like a dog. Ren 1010 or something. All over LA, all over Southern California, I would just chase car antennas. And for the next 7 years, I would. So, I'm still in the Marine Corps and I'm still doing things and I get a viable position. I move up to Quantico and, and my buddy, he's getting out and he has an ideal. He don't know that I'm hitting the pipe or smoking car antennas. He don't know that I'm smoking car antennas, and he's getting out and he comes up with a brilliant ideal that I put into practical application. His ideal was he's going to become a truck driver. He's going to drive from the East Coast to the West Coast, and every time he comes back, he's going to bring back cocaine. Now, I'm in Quantico, Virginia. Some of you probably know what Quantico, Virginia is and what they do there. For others that don't, Quantico not only trains the Marine Corps officers there, but they also train the FBI, the CIA, and all types of intelligent people that have something to do with law enforcement. Probably a dumb ideal if you want to sell cocaine in Quantico. But it seemed like a good ideal at the time, all right? I'm just saying, And so what happened is that, how... Where's Stuart at from Scotland? Where's Stu at? Stuart, you know how you got out of jail? The police told the people that they arrested, they said, you give us 2 and you can go free. He must not be here, huh? Because I know he would have said something about that. I'm not a fucking snitch, Carl. So that's what happened. 2 people got arrested and I ended up in Leavenworth. 36 months. I took the deal. They were offering me the deal. And to make it so bad, it was 10 years from the day when I was supposed to have been arrested in 76. Here it is in 86. I'm finally on my way to federal prison. I get a bad conduct discharge from the Marine Corps. I do my little 36 months over in Leavenworth, and I get out and I go to Tennessee and I try to live there. By now, I'm so resentful and I'm so hateful, that nobody really want to be around me, and I don't want to be around nobody. And I start doing stuff down there in Tennessee, and and in the South they don't play that stuff, and they put me on a bus. Two big old dudes, just like they show in the movies. Two big old dudes with Smokey the Bear hats on, grabbed me up one night and said, "Boy, if you come back here again, we're gonna kill you." They put me on a bus and sent me back to California, and that behavior didn't stop, man. I started just, I was already wreaking havoc on everywhere that I went. Now I'm starting to wreak havoc in the people that's close to me. And I started to do things and say things and hurt people that shouldn't have been hurt. Because I don't know what you do, but when I take a hit off that pipe, when I smoke cocaine, all bets are off. I have no friends. When I smoke cocaine, I hear people say they had all these lavish parties and all of that right there. No, when I smoke cocaine, that is my job, that is my business, and if you get in the way of me and my business, you will get hurt. I smoke cocaine with people one way, and they only smoke with me one time, because after I run out, I pull out my gun and I usually rob you. I don't care if you're a woman or a man, shake them, take them clothes off, everybody on the floor. That's what I do. And what happened is that I got tired, man. I got tired. In October of 1992, I had all the meat that I could stand. I smoked all I could smoke. I shot all the dope that I could shoot. I drank all that I could drink. I was at this lady's house, and I had been there for a couple of weeks, and and I hadn't showered. I hadn't did anything. When you excuse me, ladies, I'm going to talk to the guys. Fellas, when you unzip your fly and your eyes start watering, that's how funky I was. Look, you see, some of the guys not laughing because they know what I'm talking about, and that's how it got for me, man, because, it was just about getting loaded and just about getting the next one. And I had hit a lick that night. That means I went out and I robbed somebody that night. And I came back to this lady's house, and, we were smoking. I was shooting dope, and we had alcohol, and, and I shot dope, and I drank, and I smoked dope. I shot dope, and I drank, and I smoked dope. And I don't know if it ever happened to you, but on that night, on that particular night, no matter how much I put in my system, I just couldn't get loaded that night. It wasn't the fact that it stopped working, because drugs and alcohol never stop working. I just couldn't get loaded that night. I got up from that table that I was sitting at, and I went back and I knelt down on this filthy linoleum floor, and I said the words that are most effective in all the 12-step communities. God help me, please. That's all I said. And I got up off the floor, and I started walking. Now, I was in Pasadena, California when I said, God help me. And when I stopped walking, I was in Long Beach, California, which is 26 miles away. I walked to the VA hospital, and I had got a bad conduct discharge. So therefore, they wasn't supposed to allow me in the premises. But God had already had a plan for me. It was already set up. It was preordained. I was destined to be where I was supposed to be, on that day. On October 7th, I checked into the VA hospital. And they gave me 28 days, and in the 28 days there, something miraculous happened. The magic didn't happen to me, but somebody brought in the magic. Is there anybody that do hospitals and institutions in here? Anybody do that tonight? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Because a man came down and he brought a panel of hospitals and institutions in there. There's a line in our book of experience that says, practical experience shows that nothing so much ensures immunity from that next hit or that next drink than intensive work with another alcoholic. And then there's a promise. It says, this works when all other activities fail. You see, that man had read the book, and he had read it well. And I was one of the lucky stiffs that was sitting in the front row that night. And, and he came in there, man, and, I don't remember what he said, but I remember what that woman said. She said what I had heard in some other meetings, and I know some of you probably related to that. She had on some shorts that was too short for H&I. And I weighed about 135 pounds, and I looked like that bobblehead up there, just big old head and little bitty body. I had a tooth missing in the front, and I was sitting there smiling at her with a tooth missing. And I remember she looked right at me and she said, "Carl, if you want what I have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it." And right after the meeting, I wanted to see what she had, you know. And what happened is the man cut me off, and you know, and he told me, he asked me, he said, "Man, where you live?" And I didn't want to tell him I'm homeless in Pasadena. He said, "When you get out of here, man," he said, "go to Altadena 185. Now, if you guys remember, I told you my mother lived in Altadena, right? The church that the man suggested that I go to was 185 Altadena Drive. My mother lived in 186 Altadena Drive. I had been sitting on her porch a lot of times, sitting on the porch, just looking straight ahead and watching these people going in and out of this meeting, and I didn't know it was a meeting. I just thought to myself, damn, them the church goingest people I ever seen in my life. You know, they were there every day, just going and going. And, you know, and I went to my first meeting of Cocaine Anonymous on a Thursday, and, you know, and back in 92, you know, the people wasn't that nice up in there, man, because, you know, I had 28 days straight out of treatment, and, you know, and I knew a whole lot. I did, and I wanted to share with them how much I knew. Hear what I had to say. And they proved it when the lady told me. I raised my hand, she said, "Newcomer, sit your ass down and shut the fuck up." And what made it so bad, she had a cast on her leg, and I know she couldn't fight. And I just sat down like the punk that I was, you know. And, you know, and I started going to meetings, man, and, you know, and I wouldn't suggest you do this, people, if you knew in the fellowship. I started going to meetings. I went to meetings Monday through Friday. I didn't go on Saturday and Sunday because I wanted to watch American football. And then somebody told me, said, "Hey, man, you know, people get loaded on Saturday and Sunday." I said, "What?" And I started going on Saturday and Sunday. And I had commitments, and I would do the literature commitment, the coffee commitment, and little commitments like that, but I had no major commitments like sponsorship. And I stayed around for 6 months, and I was lifting weights, wearing wife beater t-shirts, walking around like I was still on the yard. And wonder why nobody was hugging me. And there was this man there, you know, I didn't like him. I really didn't like him because he had embarrassed me in front of them girls one day. Because, you know, I couldn't read when I got here, and I was reading who was a cocaine addict. Well, I was destroying who was a cocaine addict, and he corrected me. And I looked at him, and he looked at me, and he said, "Keep coming back." And I said, "I am. I'm coming back to whoop your ass." You know? My sole intentions, you know. And I started hanging out, and I started ear hustling. You know what ear hustling is? People who've been sober for a while, I would, you know, kind of ease up and listen to their conversations. And one day I had got my little first car, you know, my little $200 CA car, and, you know, and this day, for some reason, after the meeting was over, the parking lot went, woof. Everybody was gone except for that man, and my car wouldn't start. And he came over to me, and he said, "Hey, man, you need some help?" "Hey, man, screw you, pal." And I started walking, and it was a long way to get down the street. And I started walking, and it was hot like it is, you know, 45 Celsius or above. It was hot, and, you know, and he drove past me, and he went, "Eek, eek." I was furious, you know. And I turned the corner and walked some more. He came again. Eek, eek. Oh, I was thinking I'm going to kill him when I see him. I'm just getting my hands around his neck, you know. And, you know, and he came back down the hill, and he said, "Eek, eek." And we let the window down. He said, "Hey, man, you need a ride?" I said, "Yeah." Oh no. Don't clap, because I didn't surrender now. I got in the car, I slammed the door as hard as I could, and I commenced to look at him, you know, with that steely-eyed, sex-crazed killer look. And he's driving along, man, and he's talking about God, his family been restored, the 12-step made it possible, and all of this. And he turned and he looked at me the same way I was looking at him. Man, do you want me to sponsor you? Man, I didn't even have enough humility to ask somebody, would you help me save my life? I'm glad this man had read the book, and he read that part where it said, the man who was making the approach. You see, what has happened is that the young man was talking about it last night or the night before. We've gotten lazy around here, and, you know, as we got some time in sobriety, well, we don't want to make the approach no more. We think because we get some time, and like time means something, time means you just closer to your next hit. That's all it means, okay? And then we think because we done got some time that we don't have to approach the newcomer. You know, what we do in my home group, if you walk in new, somebody will come over to you. We'll give you 5 minutes to get you some coffee. By the time you get sat down, good 3 or 4 people done walked over to you. Hey, how you doing? What you want here? You know, and we do weird stuff. You know, I don't give the newcomer my number. I say, what's your number? And then I do something weird. I call them. They be like, who is this? What do you want? This is a hostage situation. We coming to get you. You know, so what that man did was he told me, he said, I need you to meet me here every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. And every Saturday morning we met, and he literally walked me through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. He walked me through line by line, paragraph by paragraph, and page by page. Everybody don't go through that way, but the man knew I was having problems reading. So he took time out with me. You know, and he introduced me to the steps nice and slow where I could get an understanding of the steps. Not only have an understanding, but have an experience, because that's what Bill said this book was about. It was about having an experience. And, you know, and I had an experience, man, and I started to see the truth in the first step, what it was really about how my life had become unmanageable. You know, my life had become unmanageable long before, you know, I had started drinking and using. My life became unmanageable when I left my mama's house. Huh? Think about it. When was your life manageable? The only time when my life was manageable when somebody else was managing it. Most of the time I didn't like the people who was managing it, but, you know, they were doing a better job than I was. You know, inmate, get against that wall. You know, so we started to look at the unmanageability, you know, and then we started to look at some other things. We talked about the physical part, the physical aspect of this disease, how my body would do some weird stuff, right? You know, this is the weird part about the body, right? The body will do some weird stuff like this. The body will start talking to the mind. Your body don't do that? Think about it when you was getting loaded. Your mind will have an idea, but your body will start making all kind of noises. And your mind will say, huh? What you say? And then your body will go, and your mind will say, sound like a good idea to me. And then your mind will think that it came up with an idea that it's going to go get us, it's going to go get one, it's going to get loaded. This is what your mind say. I'm going to go get loaded. And your mind will get one hit, and then it don't get no more hits because your body take the rest of it. And now your mind is mad at your body saying, I told you, motherfucker, we should have went home. And then the book makes it real clear. It says, where the main problem centers in my mind. You see, but I have to talk about the body first. I have to talk about the body. I have to know what the body does and how the body can trick my mind just like my mind can trick my body. You see? So if the main problem centers in my mind, then, you know, I have to go into the second step. And, you know, when I go into the second step, it's real funny because, you know, a lot of people think that the second step is just going to talk about God. It is going to talk about God, but the second step is going to talk about something that we don't even talk about. It says in the second step that a power greater than who? A power greater than who? Myself. I needed a power greater than myself. So if I have to have a power greater than myself, what does that mean? That means that I'm a power. I'm a power. I've been operating under the power of Carl for so long that I don't even know that I need a power greater than me. Because I think that I'm the greater power. I'm the Alpha and the Omega. Look at how I live if I don't think I'm the Alpha and the Omega. Who makes decisions for me? I make decisions for me. And what happens when I make decisions for me? That's right. They don't turn out right, but then I have the power to blame you. If you hadn't have been here, I wouldn't have done that. So I need a power that's greater than me. I need a power that's greater than me because I'm a power. And I have something that no other thing on this earth have, except for people like us. And that's the power of will, the power of reason, and the power of self. And it manifests, self be manifesting itself in various ways. That's what the book said. And self starts to make all kinds of decisions for self. And if I don't have a power greater than me, guess who I'll go to when I have a problem? I'll go to the power of self. So in other words, I go to the same place for a solution that's causing the problem. Oh, y'all got quiet now, huh? He's like, oh, he ain't bullshitting no more. We ain't in Kansas no more, darling. And so that's why the third step becomes so important. You see, because in the third step, that's where, for the first time in my wretched life, I get to do something that I've never done. I get to find out some things about me, first of all. Everybody knows that I'm selfish, that I'm self-centered. You know, they already know that, but now I get to find out. Everybody knows that I'm always in collision with everybody else. You already know that about me. You know, how do you know that I'm in collision with somebody else? Why are you always coming home with knots on your head? You keep falling. You keep having personal problems with everybody that you know. So in the third step, I get to do something. I get to find out something, first of all. You know, I think for me, the most important promise that I found out in the third step was that my problems were of my own making. See, I don't need you to do anything. I don't need you to get better. You can stay just as you are because I'm the one that's going to create the problems anyway. You can be loving, kind, gentle. You can be all that stuff, but I'm going to create a problem regardless on how it falls down. Carl is going to do something. So my problems are of my own making. So that gives me permission to stop blaming you, and that gives you permission to stop taking charge of my bullshit. And then I go into the third step. And in the third step prayer, you know, the third step prayer is irrevocable. You see, once you take the third step prayer, you can't give that back. You know, and a lot of people think that, you hear it in meetings all the time. Well, I took the third step, but I gave it back. You can't do that. Once you take the third step, once you say, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as I will, you're done. It's a done data. Done. You don't get to do that no more. You can think about it. You can try and do it, but you don't get to do it anymore. Oh, you stick a fork in you. You're done. It's over. You see, the third step is irrevocable. But it says, we thought well before taking this vital step, making sure that we was ready. And at last I could abandon myself utterly unto him. I got to give all of me to him. If I want the results, I got to give all of me to him. And then the thing about it is that I need power because I'm powerless, so I need power in order to write inventory. I need power. I need power to see the truth because, I've been living in 3 dimensions all my life. All my life I live in 3 dimensions. What you did to me, how it affected me, and who you are. I've been living in 3 dimensions, and the book makes it real clear. If you got a sponsor that tells you to burn your inventory, you tell them Carl from Pomona, California told you to find a different sponsor. Because the book says it's going to tell you, referring back to our list, it says now we're going to look at it from a different angle. And when we start looking at it from a different angle, we're going to start looking at some other stuff. We're going to start looking at the 4th column. We're going to start looking at some truth in there. And I know, we start talking about inventory, people get quiet. They be like, there he go again. He don't know what I do. And so, and now I get to do something that I've never done before because, I grew up in a neighborhood like most of you did. You was told as a child, don't tattletale, right? Don't snitch, don't tattletale. But this time I get a chance to snitch on myself. I get a chance to tell somebody what they already know about me anyway. I get a chance to tell somebody the truth about some stuff that I've been holding on to and I can't be free of, and I'll never be at peace until I get rid of it. Until I get rid of it. It's not where I go to somebody's house and I hear people say, I'm going and dump my inventory on my sponsor. No, you ain't going to dump nothing on me. We're going to sit down and we're going to have a long conversation is what we're going to do. Ain't no dumping here, buddy. And so we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this. And we're going to not only are we going to look at the liabilities, but we're going to look at your assets too. Because, there's some good in all of us, man. And sometimes we just got to be able to see what the good is. The book don't say an amoral or an immoral inventory. And that's what most people end up writing is an immoral inventory. And then the people that write an immoral inventory, they come back and tell the people who haven't wrote inventory just how horrible it is to write inventory. My friend Russell, man, he shared at the San Gabriel Pomona Valley Convention a few years ago. I was so impressed by what he said and what happened. He shares a story. Can I share it, Russell? About him and his sponsor. His sponsor told Russell, come over. His sponsor says, come on over. I'm going to watch a movie. Russell didn't hear that part. Russell heard, we going to watch a movie. So he said, his sponsor told him, you go write inventory. I'm going to watch a movie. And I sat there, I was like, wow, innovative. Jeez. And Russell wrote inventory and Russell got free. You see what I mean? Because Russell didn't know about the boogeyman. And you hear people telling the boogeyman stories. Oh, if you write inventory, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. You haven't wrote inventory, so shut your mouth. And then I roll on into step 6, man. And this is the deal right here, man. When you hear somebody tell you, they say, go home and work on your defects. Carl from from Pomona, California said, if your sponsor tell you to go home and work on your defects, find a new sponsor. You see, you cannot make grass grow through concrete, but yet grass grows through concrete, right? I don't have the power to work on my defects, so there's another step that comes behind that's going to grant me some power. And it's going to take care of my defects for me because it's going to say to remove these. But I got to be willing to do it, though. You can't do like I did with my first set of inventory. There were some things that I really wouldn't like to give up with, like slutting around. There's some people in here know what I'm talking about. And, I didn't say whoring around because whores get paid. I was doing it for free, so I was slutting. You know what I mean? So I didn't want to give up that in the beginning, that slutting around. And it's like everything else. Pain is the great motivator. Pain will make you stop slutting around. Plus getting 3 women pregnant will make you stop slutting around. And so, and then you sit down, man, and you started writing that 8-step list. And, and on your 8-step list, a lot of times, man, there's some people that's going to be on your 8-step list that you have nothing, no resentment with. you know, but you got to refer back to that, so don't burn the inventory. Good. So, and then, you know, you set out on the amends process. Man, I'll share a couple of amends with y'all. I'm not going to keep y'all long. We're going to get this thing going. And so, after doing that list in the 8th step, man, my daughter, my daughter, she was born in 1979. And she was my baby. You know, just like most daughters, you know, gentlemen, we they first love. You know, this is the little girl that rode on my shoulders, and, you know, I picked her up from school. We walked home and we went and got ice cream, and she rode on my shoulders and put ice cream on my eyes, and, you know, all of that stuff, right? And then, you know, I started messing with cocaine, and the relationship between me and her mother severed, and the relationship between me and my daughter severed, because I started making promises that I wouldn't keep. You know, like, I'll be there and I'll do this and I'll do that. And none of those things were happening. My daughter, she hated me. I mean, she was so angry with me when I got sober, man, that a lot of times I would just try to avoid her. But I knew I couldn't avoid her because, you know, I had done wrong and I needed to make it right. And so the first time I sat down with her and, you know, and I made the amends, and we talked, and I asked her, was there anything else she'd like to share with me and what I could do would make it right. And, you know, and it went on for a couple of years, and, you know, and we used to go to dinner with the family and stuff like that. And my daughter, she would always sit on the end there, and I would sit down here. And she would say stuff like, ask him to pass me the salt. My name was Him. And it was Him for a couple of years. And, you know, and I just kept doing what you guys told me to do. You know, I didn't parent out of guilt, because a lot of times, you know, that's what we want to do. We want to parent out of guilt. But I parented out of, you know, out of what CA had taught me. Out of women had taught me how to, you know, take care of this. And what I did was I started keeping my word. I started doing things. If I tell my daughter I'm going to be there at 7 o'clock, you know, at 6:59, I was knocking on the door. If I tell her I was going to be at her school for something, an event, I was there early and I stayed to the end. You know, if I tell her that, you know, I was going to buy this dress for you for this reason, and that's what I did. And, you know, and I started doing this, and you know, and that gap between me and her at the table, it started to get a little bit smaller. It started to get a little bit smaller. And then my baby, man, she was 15 and she got pregnant. And, you know, and I almost lost my mind. I didn't know what to do. And so I went back and I talked to the ladies in Cocaine Anonymous, and what they told me to do was they said, be a father. Be a father. Said, don't verbally abuse your child. If she decides she wants to keep this baby, what you have to do is you have to support her in everything that she does. And I started to support her in everything, in every aspect. You know, her and her husband, they've been together since they were 14 years old, and they're both 36 now. You know, the deal is that when my daughter got ready to get married, she called her father. You see what I'm saying? Because I had started doing the things that you guys told me to do. She called her father and said, Dad, me and Joanne are going to go to Vegas and get married. And her dad said, no, you're not. Since you're going to get down, you're going to stay down here, and you're going to have the type of wedding that you want to have. She said, but we can't afford it. And I said, but I can. I said, that's my responsibility. So I gave my baby the type of wedding that she wanted to have. And I got a chance to walk my daughter down the aisle, you know. See, that's Cocaine Anonymous, man. You know, and the deal is that, you know, I was talking with Jackie earlier because Jackie didn't know. And, you know, where's my friends from Scotland at? Where's my Scotland friends at? You know, I want to thank you. Thank you, because in 2012 you invited me to Scotland. And, you know, and it was right after my son had died. And, you know, and it was a very emotional time for me. And, you know, and you guys invited me there, man, and you guys just loved on me, and, you know. I said that wasn't going to happen because I needed to be tough today, you know. But you guys just loved on me, man, and and I'll never forget that, man. Stuart and and David, and they were our hosts, and and me and Dave been Facebook friends since 2002, man. And I always like to hit Dave and ask him how was his mother and how his sister, because they took care of us when we was there, and and I just love you guys for that, man. So thank you, and I appreciate you. And if I can ever do anything for you, don't hesitate to call me, all right? If I could ever do anything for you, so that's what Cocaine Anonymous did for me. It took a guy like me, thank you. Look at that, you're crying like a little girl. And then the lady passing the neck. It's usually the other way around, But what I found out is that in Cocaine Anonymous, men do cry, And what has happened is that in 2 years before my son died, my mom died, and so for the last 6 years, that's what I've been dealing with. I've been dealing with death, and and I was talking to one of the brothers earlier, and from Scotland, and he asked me, have I got past that yet? And truly I have not, and I was sharing with him, man, I have letters from my son when he was locked up. He was in jail, and I have letters that sits on the mantle, and I haven't read them yet, and and one day I'm going to read them, because I don't know what they're going to say, but whatever it is, it's going to be a time to get free. But right now I'm just not ready yet. I just want to hold on to some of those memories, and and eventually I'll let that stuff go, and so that's where I'm at with that, and let me share with you about Cocaine Anonymous, man. I got sober in 92, and I started doing service work in 92. And, for the guy that couldn't read when he got here, right, I went from being a area service or doing meeting service to area service to world service to the Board of Trustees to the chairperson of the Board of Trustees. I served with Jackie, I served with Philip, I served with Jack B, I served with Nick the Stitch, all of these great people over here, man, and I'll share things about your area to you that you probably don't even know, and I'll be honest with you, that lady right there, she's sitting right there. That lady got more balls than most men I know. I'm telling it to you, When Jackie made the motion for you guys to become a region, remember Jackie? Some people in America, they were saying, nah, we're not ready, we can't afford it, and all of this stuff. And, and Jackie sat next to me and where the Board of Trustees sat there, and I was telling Jackie, make the motion, Jackie, make the motion. Screw them. And Jackie got up there and she said, I'd like to make a motion. And she made the motion that you guys become a region. The UK region. I was so proud of her that day, man. And the whole room just erupted. And this little lady right here, my friend. If Nick is still here, Nick liked to say he was the first European trustee. I tell him all the time, Jackie was. I tell him to piss him off. That's why I tell him that. I was the first European regional trustee. No, he wasn't, Nick. Jackie was. Man, I love Cocaine Anonymous, man. It has taken me to places and allowed me to do things that I thought I would never be able to do again. My friend Ian over there, man. Ian invited me over here, was it 2011? And, and I wasn't able to leave the state because, I had what Eric was talking about earlier. I had some unfinished amends, $80,000 worth. And I wasn't going to give them their money. And the United States government said, if you ever want to leave here, you're going to give us our money. And I called them up and I made a deal with them. And I started chipping away at it. Chipping away. And I gave them their 80 grand. And, and now I can go, like our books say, I can go anywhere any other free man can go. And that's all about Cocaine Anonymous, man. What I share with you is that, you guys have not only affected my life, but you infected my whole family. You know what I'm saying? I didn't say you affected, I said you infected. You infected my whole family. You infected them with love. see, that's what you did. You infected them with love because, see, first you loved me, and in the process of loving me and building me and making me into a whole man, I was able to take what you gave me and take it into my family. You know, me and my brother-in-laws, we used to not get along and argue and have fist fights and stuff. And, you know, and now, you know, we haven't had a fist fight in 23 years. And, you know, we sit at the same tables with each other and have decent conversations because of Cocaine Anonymous, man. Everything that I am is because of you. You see, you created this right here. You created me. And, you know, and I'm so grateful for you, man, for everything that you've done in my life, for everything that you've done in my family life, man. My mother, she loved Cocaine Anonymous. Before she died, she told me one thing. She said, whatever you do, don't stop going to see the people. Told me, don't stop going to see the people. Don't stop seeing you guys. You know, and I'll never stop coming to see you guys because, see, you guys, man, you all make it possible for me to wake up every morning. You all make it possible for me to pray to a God that I so truly will never really understand. But you told me that he was there, and if I prayed to him and did his work well, that he would provide for what I need. And he has provided for what I needed for the last 23 years. As a matter of fact, I'm overpaid. I have more than I will ever need because of what you guys done. You know, man, I'm so grateful, man. I'm so grateful to the fellowship, man. There's been some great people in my life and some great mentors, man. And one of the guys named Herman. Herman used to always tell me, he said, son, either you're going to go or you're going to grow. I said, that's it. He said, you're going to go or you're going to grow. He said, some people have to leave here, man. Some people have to leave here, and, you know, and let me go off the cuff and share this I was sharing with Ricky. You know, don't believe a lot of the bullshit that you hear around here, okay? I needed to just get that out. You know, you hear people say, some of us will have to die for others to live. Bullshit. Okay? I'm not a real Christian or anything like that, but the Christian Bible said that was taken care of over 2,000 years ago. So you don't have to do nothing for me. If you want to go out and die, that's on you. You're not doing me a favor. You're not doing me a favor. So hang out with us, man. Live. Man, this is the, bar none, this is the best that I've ever had. I've never known life to be this good right now as it is. So with that, and thus we grow, and so can you. Though you be but one man with this book in your hand, we believe and hope it contains all you will need to begin. We know what you are thinking. You're saying to yourself, I'm jittery and I'm alone. I cannot do that, but you can. For you forgot that you have just now tapped into a source of power much greater than yourself. To duplicate with such backing what we have accomplished is only a matter of patience, willing, and labor. Still, you may say, I will not have the benefit of contact with you who write this book. We cannot be sure. God will determine that, so you must remember that your real reliance is always upon him. He will show you how to create the fellowship that you crave. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize that we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation, which you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously, you cannot transmit something that you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past and give freely of what you find and join us. And we shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit. And you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. And I'll leave you with the last 9 words of our founder and our co-founder. May God bless you and keep you until then. Thank you very much.